Hi, I'm Paula Winke,
I'm WinkeZhang.
and we're researchers at Michigan State University in the Second Language Studies program.
You guys are adorable. I think it's recording. Is it recording, Paul?
The study we're going to talk about is purely quantitative in nature, but we thought we'd also contextualize it a little bit with these kids. These are neighborhood friends, Kenny and Jack, English language learners, and SJ, a native speaker of English.
You guys are funny.
All three were in third grade together. So in the United States, at least 16 states, plus the District of Columbia, have enacted retention laws tied to public schools children's third grade reading test scores. So broadly speaking, what these laws mean is that when a third grader who reads below grade level, they're not automatically allowed to progress on to fourth grade.
Have you heard about the new Read by Grade 3 law that's going to start in Michigan in 2020?
No. Yes.
Well, in Michigan and in many states, the law is based on a theory of reading that has developed over the last 15 or 20 years. It's a law that it's like a critical period hypothesis for reading for children. It says that by third grade, if children aren't able to read at grade level, they're less likely to be able to be academically successful later in their program. And as you'll read in the paper, some states even claim that if they're not reading well by third grade, they might fail academically and not be able to graduate from high school. Michigan's third grade reading retention law, it's called the Read by Grade 3 law. It goes into effect in 2020. It was passed in 2016. And what it says is that a child has to have a reading score that is less than one grade level behind. So in Michigan, the test that's used to determine the reading benchmark is the state English Language Arts Assessment. It's part of the Michigan Test of Educational Progress, known as the EMSTEP. And ELLs who have had less than 3 years of instruction in an English language learner program can be exempt from the law as long as they apply for a good cause exemption. And in Michigan, there is a way that another test could be used for interpreting this law. A portfolio could be used or an alternative assessment, but those have to be approved by the school superintendent. And as far as we know, there's no provisions set in place to allow that to happen, but it could happen.
So it's a test. The EMSTEP is, you just took it in third grade, right?
Yeah.
And starting next year, not this year, but next year in 2020, if you don't get a passing score on the EMSTEP, they don't know exactly what passing will be, then you have to repeat third grade.
You'd be a third grader again.
So in Michigan, in particular, students take two different reading tests if they're English language learners. They take the EMSTEP because all children take the EMSTEP. It's a test of English language arts. But children in Michigan starting from kindergarten also take the WIDA Access for ELLs. This test was made specifically for ELLs. It has a reading component, and it's currently given in 39 U.S. states and territories. So we had two different research questions in our paper. We wanted to know the relationship between these two child reading test scores. And also we really wanted to map on the law, the 2020 law, onto the 2016 test data. How would the new Michigan retention law affect ELLs in Michigan if the law had been in effect in spring 2016?
So this is the EMSTEP scale, and the score ranges from 1203 to 1357. And there are 4 achievable levels on EMSTEP from level 1 to level 4. And the proposed cutoff between partially proficient and proficient is 1300. And for WIDA, it's a little bit different because there are 6 achievable levels on WIDA, and there's no cutoff for being proficient or non-proficient on WIDA. So basically, WIDA puts students on a developing scale from entering to reaching. So reaching is the highest level that student can achieve, and entering is the most basic level. Okay, for this study, we created a scatter plot between EMSTEP and WIDA, and so we put EMSTEP on the y-axis and we put WIDA on the x-axis. And next we will show you correlation between these two sets of test scores based on the data of 8,323 Michigan third graders who took both tests in 2016. So to investigate the relationship between WIDA and MSTEP, we created this scatter plot based on the data of over 8,000 students. And we put MSTEP on the y-axis with a cutoff between partially proficient and proficient marked out on the scatter plot, which is 1,300 on MSTEP. And we put WIDA on the y-axis. And we also marked out the cutoff that corresponds to those discriminating between the 6 levels on WIDA axis, so from 1 to 6. So because we have a large amount of data, we cannot do a traditional scatter plot because there will be a big black blob here. That's why we color-coded everything and according to data density. So the warmer the color is, the denser the data points are in an area, which means in the red area, it has the most data points. So we want to investigate whether the relationship between WIDA and MSTEP follow a linear one. So we impose 2 sets of lines on the scatter plot. First line is the red line, which is linear, and it represents the linear relationship between WIDA and MSTEP. And the second line is this curvy line. It's blue, and it's called lowest line. This lowest line best describes the relationship between WIDA and MSTEP. So if the 2 sets of scores have a linear relationship, we should see a close match between these 2 lines, which we do see over this area, the central area. However, when the scores go down on the WIDA scales, we see that there's no similar pattern on MSTEP. So when scores go down on WIDA scale, we don't see the scores go down on MSTEP. On the contrary, the scores on MSTEP, they just scatter randomly on the scale. So that's why we suspect that over this area, where we see a big discrepancy between the red line and the blue line, we think over this area, while WIDA is still doing the job discriminating between low proficient English learners, MSTEP has lost its discriminating power for these ELL learners. The linear relationship between MSTEP and WIDA is pretty strong. It's actually 0.73. However, after we divide the data into 2 parts by using cutoff between level 3 and level 4 on WIDA, on the right side, these are the high WIDA achievers, and on the left side, these are the low WIDA achievers. So we divide those the data into 2 parts, and we calculated the correlation again separately for these 2 parts. And we found that in high achievers, the correlation stayed almost the same with the overall population, which is 0.73, which means 53% of the variance in MSTEP was explained by WIDA axis. However, among low achievers, the correlation was only 0.25, which means only 4% of variance in MSTEP was explained by WIDA axis.
So this is the most important part of the study, right?
This is the most important part of the study.
How do you feel about a reading test being used to decide if a
Sorry.
kid should repeat 3rd grade?
I think it's really sad. I wouldn't want to be separated from all my friends.
And I would not say the 3rd grade thing back. I would not let the others grow, and I would not try to stay small and grow big with my friends.
What do you think other kids might think about the test being used to decide if they should go on to 4th grade?
Hard, easy,
Yeah.
trying their best maybe.
I think that it would be really sad. I think they wouldn't think that's good. A lot of kids, though, they think the test is going to be easier, but when you take the test, it's actually really hard.
We next look to see what effect the 2020 law will likely have on ELLs in 2020. We used 2016 test data from the Michigan Department of Education, and we looked at the calculated pass rates by economic status and gender. We used the cut between proficient and partially proficient. Overall, 31% of ELLs passed. Slightly more females than males passed. Economic advantage played a huge role, with 50% of the non-economically disadvantaged passing, while just 25% of economically disadvantaged ELLs passed. The additive effect of economic status and gender collapsed on each other was huge. Non-economically disadvantaged females passed at a rate of 53%, while their economically disadvantaged male counterparts passed at a rate of only 23%. We added in home language background into this projection, and we found home language background had an effect. Spanish children were the least likely to pass. Gender had the greatest effect in the Chinese population. And overall, no matter which language background the ELLs had, if they were not economically disadvantaged, they did better. Overall, the starkest contrast within the ELL population that we were able to see was between Spanish males who were economically disadvantaged. They passed at a rate of 19%, and Chinese females who were not economically disadvantaged. They passed at a rate of 72%.
So, how do kids feel when they take the test?
They felt nervous.
Yeah.
They felt nervous.
Bad for themselves because they might go
And
back
they
to the
thought they
class.
couldn't do it, maybe.
I
It felt like they couldn't do it.
I felt really stressed out. It was a lot of questions.
Is it different from a normal lesson that you
Yes.
have
Yeah.
in class and
Yeah.
other tests that are not M-STEP tests?
It was very different.
It's different from other tests.
Yeah.
It was hard because you took it on the computer. That was a new thing. Some of the things didn't work. Like there were settings, like there was an eraser, but the eraser didn't always work.
In the paper, we
Mhm.
wrote about how teachers are turbo boosting the reading programs in Michigan, getting ready for this law. But I think the data that we show are real, and there's not going to be much change between now and 2020. That's mathematically impossible.
Yeah, it probably won't. It's pretty stable, I think, across the years, the pass rates among ELL students.
Right,
Yeah.
and it may waver from, with the ELL population, we showed a 31% pass rate.
31% passed.
I expect there's a standard error of measurement of 5% around
Yeah,
it. I mean,
probably more
just
than that
guessing,
even,
probably
yeah.
more. So when
Right.
the newspaper reports show that there's a, the students did 4% worse this year than
Yeah.
3% better the next year, that's expected from random error.
Right, it's just random error.
So I don't know, there's might be false hope out there that a higher percentage of children will pass. The only way that can happen is if the MDE very carefully sets a pass rate that's lower than that proposed one that we looked at in the study.
Right, yeah. What do you think the teachers can do for those kids?
Oh my gosh. Just keep teaching them reading. I think the teachers need to realize that probably there's a better way to document the English reading growth in ELLs, that the M-STEP is not the way to do it. Better would be to create a portfolio system where we could track the children's WIDA access scores. You can even graph it with a pencil on a chart. That in kindergarten they were here, first grade, second grade, third grade, and you can actually in third grade have a map of the reading development of ELLs. And if you see that going up, they're progressing.
Right.
It's real data. It's real.
Yeah.
And then what you could also do is find out some other information about the children in their reading and their learning environment to present to the superintendent a portfolio on that ELL child.
I think for all the educators, we're kind of advocating a new accountability system that focuses on student growth rather than student achievement, because sometimes student achievement does not reflect quality of education or quality of instruction, because they only show the cross-sectional achievement of different kids. However, if you focus on their growth, you can see each kid is making some progress each year.
I win.